As much as it pains them, Disney does not own the rights to the 1939 Wizard of Oz. MGM made that film, then Ted Turner acquired the rights, and eventually it wound up in the Warner Brothers film library, where it resides now. But the Disney quest to finally tackle the Land of Oz proved to be a long and arduous one, beginning all the way back with Walt Disney himself. Just as he was finishing up Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a film to which MGM's The Wizard of Oz owes its very existence, Walt Disney had his eyes set on the remaining Oz books. He eventually secured the rights to the sequel novels, and in the 1950s began development on a live-action musical film called Rainbow Road to Oz that was meant to showcase the Mouseketeers. Despite a television preview of some of the costumes and songs, Rainbow Road to Oz never got made. In 1985, decades after Walt Disney's death, the studio tried to tackle Oz again before the Oz books entered the public domain. The resulting film, Return to Oz, was a huge critical and commercial flop when it came out, but it has a strong cult following now. And you already heard me gush about how much I love it, so let's move on to 2013 when Disney tried to strike gold with Oz once more. The result was Oz the Great and Powerful, a film that had originally been in development at Sony and got made thanks to the involvement of Sam Raimi, best known for the Evil Dead franchise and his multi-million-dollar Spider-Man trilogy. When I first saw the trailers for this movie, I have to admit I got excited. It seemed like a good opportunity to show off just how vast and fantastical the Land of Oz really is, and to give some screen time to the other characters. But, despite my initial curiosity, I never saw this movie in theaters. And apparently a lot of other people didn't either. Now, granted, it didn't bomb, but it was nowhere near the mega franchise that Disney was hoping it would be, with sequels and spin-offs and all that. Everyone I've seen talk about this film online seems to really hate it. What did I think of it? I liked it. It's not amazing, but I don't think it deserves the hate it often gets. The story is pretty simple. Oscar Diggs is your standard Kansas traveling magician slash con man who mistreats his assistant and is a rampant womanizer. You know, one of those guys. His balloon gets trapped in a tornado and it transports him to the Land of Oz. The future Wicked Witch of the West, named Theodora, instantly falls in love with Oscar because she believes him to be the wizard whose arrival was foretold years ago, destined to bring peace to the land and all that messianic crap. Yeah, I'm not a fan of prophecy stories because they've been done to death and because they make the character out to be special simply because the script says they are, rather than them having to necessarily demonstrate special or admirable qualities. What's great about this story is that not only is the wizard a complete fraud, but he has to use his fakery in order to become a hero despite him not having powers and not being the most admirable person in the world. This is usually the main problem that people have with this film. They tend to hate Oscar Diggs because he's selfish, he's a liar, a womanizer, etc. But here's the thing, the movie never tries to position the wizard's behavior as good. Quite the contrary. I'd have had much more of a problem with this movie if it tried to somehow pass off his character traits as positive or excusable, but it doesn't. The film instead offers the message that flawed people are capable of doing great things and inspiring people in spite of their flaws. I know that the current social media climate dictates that people have to be saints in order to be worthy of admiration, but this simply isn't true. We are all beneficiaries of imperfect people throughout history. Often they did bad things in their personal lives, or they held views that we would now consider to be abhorrent. But they're admired today because of the great things that they did that had even more positive repercussions throughout history. That's just the way real life works. Everyone is a mixture of good and evil.
The whites, by law of conquest, by justice of civilization, are masters of the American continent, and the best safety of the frontier settlements will be secured by the total annihilation of the few remaining Indians. Why not annihilation? We cannot honestly regret their extermination.
That being said, I don't think the script presents its central themes as well as I'm making it sound like it does, nor do I think James Franco is necessarily the best person to portray Oscar Diggs. I know that he did great work with Sam Raimi before in his Spider-Man trilogy, playing a fantastic Harry Osborn, but this version of the Wizard of Oz needs to be someone really particular. He needs to be charismatic and lovable in spite of his badness, someone like Malcolm McDowell would have played in his prime. But sadly, charismatic actors seem to be in short supply these days, and as good of an actor as he can be, I just don't think James Franco is necessarily the right choice for this role given the kind of gravitas it needs. Mila Kunis does well as Theodora before she transforms into the Wicked Witch of the West. She gives her an innocence and a sweetness that make her appealing, along with an emotional volatility that makes you believe she could turn evil. People complain that Theodora falls for the wizard too readily and that she's too doughy-eyed, but The Land of Oz is filled with very childlike characters who tend to behave in very childlike ways. Plus, she's engaging in a classic case of hero worship, so when that innocent facade is broken, she overreacts and becomes fully wicked. She eats a green apple, which in turn makes her all witchy and green. All it does is remind me of how Snow White and the Wizard of Oz have creatively cannibalized each other for decades. The makeup does a good job of making the otherwise unbelievably gorgeous Mila Kunis look hideous, but when she tries to be intimidating, she gives off the vibe of a small dog that thinks she's a big dog. Plus, when she flies off on her broom, I couldn't help but think of Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, but I'm just nitpicking now. As we've seen with previous adaptations, there are real-world versions of the Oz characters, including Zach Braff as Oscar's beleaguered Kansas Carney assistant, and as his beleaguered flying monkey assistant in Oz. Michelle Williams plays both Glinda and Dorothy Gale's mother. I like the implication that the wizard might be Dorothy's real father, and trust me, this isn't the only Oz adaptation that plays with that idea. Interestingly enough, there are no real-world equivalents of Mila Kunis or Rachel Weisz, who plays the Wicked Witch of the East in this film. This brings us to Joey King, who plays a dual role as a girl in a wheelchair in Kansas, and she voices the China Girl in Oz. She's the heart and soul of the movie. Her home, known as Chinatown, was destroyed by Noah Cross, I mean the Wicked Witch of the East. Because she's made of porcelain, her legs break underneath the rubble, but in a notable act of compassion, the wizard glues her legs back together so she can walk again. This mirrors an incident that happened back in Kansas where Joey King, as the girl in the wheelchair, begged for the wizard to make her walk, and he couldn't because, well, he has no powers. Similarly, the wizard can't bring the China Girl's loved ones back to life, but in spite of his limitations, he inspires her and the citizens of Oz to do even greater things than even he's capable of. That really is the message of the movie. So that's a lot about the characters in the story, but what about the overall presentation? Well, because Disney doesn't own the rights to the 1939 classic, the filmmakers had to be clever with how they paid homages to that film without directly copying it. That's why the exact look of the Emerald City, the Wicked Witch of the West, the Wizard, other elements, they could only suggest or evoke the MGM film. Easily the most spectacular part of the whole movie is the transition from Kansas to Oz. The film starts out in a 4:3 aspect ratio and in black and white rather than sepia tone because, well, that'd be too close to the 1939 film. But once the clouds part and Oz becomes visible, the screen widens, the sound switches from mono to stereo to surround, and the black and white turns to spectacular color. And what spectacular color it is! This has to be one of the most colorful movies made in recent years. The Land of Oz looks every bit as spectacular and fantastical as you'd hope. It really goes to show what CGI can do that painted sets can't do. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of green screen compositing, some of which has aged better than others. This could also be because Oz looks so much like a cartoon world that the real actors stand out even more, but you could argue that's part of the point. So yeah, overall, I thought Oz the Great and Powerful was pretty good for what it was. I think it laid a good foundation to build on, and I don't think it deserves the hate it often gets. I'd still be open to a sequel or another film set in this version of Oz, but that might be difficult considering that James Franco is, persona non grata right now. Plus, Disney's so busy with Marvel and Star Wars that I doubt they'd have much room for Oz, which is sad in and of itself. Still, Oz the Great and Powerful did help jumpstart a new wave of big-budget Oz adaptations on film and television, so that has to count for something. As much as other fantasy series and real-life stressors often get in the way, The Land of Oz never stays dormant for long.